Visit Jerusalem's Old City and you'll discover a couple of secrets immediately. First of all, this amazing city is a lot smaller than you might have imagined. And second of all, the walls around the Old City are relatively young. But from corner to corner, these 500-year-old city walls span only about 8 city blocks at the most. If you'd like to walk completely around the Old City, it will require a hike of only about 2.5 miles of walking, though it is a rather difficult hike. Now, as you make that circle, just know this: the position of the city walls have changed many, many times. Archaeologists suggest that ancient Jerusalem may have changed its shape, those city walls, at least in part, no less than 16 times. It's nearly impossible to tell exactly where the city walls of Jerusalem stood when Jesus was alive. After all, the Old City is very much a vibrant community today. Some 37,000 people live here, shop here, work here, go to school here, and worship here. It's hard to look for the past when so many people are literally living on top of the ancient streets. Jerusalem was just as crowded when Jesus was condemned to die. His final walk to the cross would have been through some very narrow, very noisy streets. But before he walked the Via Dolorosa, he would pray at Gethsemane. After Jesus and the disciples took part in the Passover meal inside the city, they left the upper room, crossed the Kidron Valley, and slipped into what was for them a very familiar garden. Now, it would have been late in the evening, perhaps as late as midnight after the Passover meal was completed, after all that symbolic activity had taken place. And as they walked, they probably noticed that the moon was full. There was plenty of light to see all that would happen here. Gethsemane lies at the base of the Mount of Olives, right where you would expect it to be. The word Gethsemane is the clue, the secret hidden in plain sight. The word Gat means press, and Shemanim means oil. So a Gat Shemanim would be an oil press, Gethsemane, as we would say in our language. Harvesting olives is hard work. Hauling those heavy bags of olives to the oil press would best be done, therefore, going downhill. And on this hill, once known for its heavy presence of olive trees, the place to turn your olives into money, the Gethsemane, was at the base of the hill. There was a garden associated with the oil press, and it was here that Jesus and the disciples planned on bedding down for the night in that very pleasant spring weather. Jesus, however, was not about to sleep. He knew that the hour of his betrayal was upon him, and he was stressed to his very limits. Luke, who may have been a physician, tells us that it appeared he was sweating drops of blood from his forehead. That can happen, modern-day doctors tell us, if a person under extreme stress ruptures blood vessels in his forehead very near the sweat glands that are also positioned there. Now, before we get to Judas and the arrest of Jesus, I want you to pay attention to how close we are to the Temple Mount. Gethsemane is less than 500 steps from the eastern gate, one of the entrances to the Temple Mount, and directly in line with the temple itself. It's directly above Gethsemane, up the steep hills of the Kidron Valley. Now, if what's being said is said loudly enough, anything said in one location could have been heard in the other, either at the Temple Mount or at Gethsemane. Now, on Yom Kippur, each fall, the high priest came to the eastern gate with a scapegoat, ready to release the condemned animal into the Judean wilderness. The Judean wilderness is directly behind, or on the eastern side, of the Mount of Olives. Now, Yom Kippur is a very solemn day of fasting and prayer, and it's the only day of the year when the high priest would pronounce the name of God. Every time he pronounced the name of God, everyone present would fall down out of reverence to God's name. Now, Yom Kippur was 6 months away when Jesus was praying in Gethsemane and when he was arrested there. This was Passover in the spring. Even so, please do not forget what all the Jewish people saw, heard, and did every year at the Eastern Gate on Yom Kippur. It might help us understand something very unusual that happened when Jesus was arrested. Judas arrived with a very large armed guard that planned on overwhelming Jesus and his remaining 11 disciples. According to John's carefully worded description of what happened there were a few hundred guards present. They came prepared to overwhelm this small group of men. And no wonder the 11 disciples ran for their lives. There's no way they could have won the fight. Now, the police force was not a Roman guard. It was what might have been called a temple guard. They were all Jewish men, this Jewish guard. If it had been a force of Roman soldiers, Jesus would have been taken to a Roman prison and brought immediately before Roman authorities. The Romans were not about to submit to Jewish authorities, but instead, Jesus was taken by this Jewish guard to the home of Caiaphas, the high priest. Before he would appear before Pilate and Herod Antipas, Jesus would first be grilled and even beaten by the Jewish authorities. By the time the sun was up, he had been convicted by the priest and was whisked off to Pilate, taking the first steps he would take along the pavement stones that would lead him eventually to the cross on this same day. But for now, return to Gethsemane and see two more secrets that are hidden in plain sight. First, Jesus spoke again about a cup he did not want to drink. Just 1 week earlier, when James and John had asked for positions of leadership in the kingdom Jesus was about to establish, he asked them, "Can you drink the cup I am going to drink?" Now, they insisted they could. Jesus insisted they could not. All in all, it's a strange way of putting things to our ears and our culture. Why would Jesus use this illustration of a cup with his disciples? And again, as he prayed earnestly at Gethsemane, use the cup imagery again, asking the Father that this cup be taken away from me. The answer, not surprisingly, is found in the text. God has a cup of wrath, the Bible says repeatedly in many different locations, that will one day be poured out on the nations. The description of this cup of wrath is so vivid and so horrible, the one thing that you need to know about it is that you don't want anything to do with it. You do not want to drink the cup of God's wrath. Jesus did not want to drink it either. Jesus and the disciples also had just finished the world's most symbolic meal, the Passover meal. In the Passover meal, there are 4 cups of wine that symbolize sanctification, deliverance, redemption, and praise. So on this particular night, Jewish people everywhere were accustomed to cup language. They'd been using it all night long. There's also a 5th cup in the Passover meal, one reserved for Elijah the prophet. It's believed by tradition that when Elijah drinks that 5th cup at the Passover meal, Jewish people will see the ushering in of the era of the Messiah. Now combine all of that cup symbolism into one incredible scene at Gethsemane. Jesus is the Messiah, providing the redemption of man, but having to live through the horrible wrath of the cross in order to provide that salvation. He would take the cup that he didn't want to drink. Not my will, but yours, he prayed. Little wonder he could not sleep. And frankly, after such a big meal, biggest meal of the year perhaps, and 4 cups of wine, it's little wonder why the disciples could not stay awake as they tried to pray. Now for a second insight, besides the cup language. When Judas arrived, chaos ensued. But even there, Jesus took charge. "Who is it that you want?" Jesus asked. They replied, "Jesus of Nazareth." "I am he," Jesus said. And with that, John tells us the entire guard, remember they're all Jewish, fell back and fell to the ground. They fell to the ground. What's going on? Now, perhaps it has to do with exactly where they are. This is one of the possibilities. Remember, the Eastern Gate is hanging above this entire scene. It's as if it's overseeing everything that happens at Gethsemane. The Holy Temple was within the sound of all of their voices, including that powerful proclamation, "I am he." Now, most importantly, remember that this police force was indeed a group of Jewish men. They were accustomed to falling to the ground every time they heard the holy name of God. If you'll study the original languages of the Bible, you might see something here. Because when Jesus said, "I am he," he may well have been intentionally using the language from the burning bush of Exodus 3 when God first shared his name with Moses. If so, it's no surprise that this Jewish guard drew back and fell to the ground. They were not acknowledging that Jesus was God on earth. That's one thing we know for sure. They simply may have been conditioned to fall to the ground upon hearing the name. And they might have been shocked at the audacity of Jesus for even coming close to that. He was still confident. He was still on message. He seemed to be in charge even as he was being arrested. Maybe they were falling back in fear, not wanting to be struck by lightning as God would punish anyone for coming that close to his name. Whatever the reason, the soldiers recovered in a matter of moments. They would bind Jesus up and take him to the home of Caiaphas, where he would be held in a dungeon-like prison until the Sanhedrin gathered before dawn the next morning. There would be no turning back from the path that Jesus had chosen from this point forward. He was only a few steps away, a few hours away from his final walk down the Via Dolorosa. Wow, thanks so much for joining us for this week's edition of Secrets from the Via Dolorosa, part of our Secrets from the Ancient Past videocast. We're getting closer to the cross with every episode, and I hope you join me next week as we continue our journey together. And you may want to go a little deeper in this study. I've written a book called Secrets from the Via Dolorosa, and if you would like to have a copy, just follow the links in our website, secretsfromtheancientpast.com, or another website we have called experienceisraelnow.com. I hope you will. I hope you'll enjoy it, and I can't wait to see you again next time. I'm Andy Cook.